Blood is thicker than water. That was their excuse to bleed me dry. But when your own family steals your only sanctuary, you learn a brutal truth about modern America. The most dangerous enemies do not break down your door. They already have the keys. I did not cry when my parents texted that they had sold my house. I just smiled in the dark, preparing a trap they would proudly walk into, thinking they had won. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to Maya Revenge Stories today. We have to share some difficult news. YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to continue operations, which means we unfortunately will not be uploading new videos here in the near future. Instead, we are moving our operations over to Patreon. So if you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us there to access exclusive, real-life stories that are even longer, feature much deeper details, and include multiple emotional voice actors for a truly immersive experience that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can join our Patreon family by scanning the QR code currently on your screen or by clicking the link in the video description or the pinned comment below. Now, let us dive right into today's chilling tale, as experienced by our protagonist, Isabel Soto. I am 32 years old, and my life for the past 5 years has been defined by the crushing pressure of the deep sea. I work as a remotely operated vehicle engineer for Abyssal Tech Solutions, stationed on a colossal deep ocean research rig anchored right in the middle of the unforgiving Gulf of Mexico. My reality consists of 14-hour shifts staring at sonar screens, guiding multi-million-dollar submarines through the pitch-black abyss. It is exhausting, bone-chilling work that demands absolute focus. There are no weekends out here, no holidays, just the rhythmic groaning of the steel rig and the endless expanse of dark water. For 3 solid weeks, our satellite communication array had been down due to a massive atmospheric anomaly. That meant no emails, no calls, just total isolation from the mainland. When the technicians finally restored the uplink, my phone vibrated with a backlog of notifications. I wiped the grease from my hands, leaned against the cold steel bulkhead of the control room, and opened the very first message that popped up. It was from my father, Arthur. It read, "We sold your cabin to save Chloe. What is done. Do not make things ugly." I stared at the glowing screen, the harsh blue light reflecting in my tired eyes. There was no greeting, no asking if I was safe after 3 weeks of silence. Just a cold, calculated theft delivered via text message. That cabin in Silver Pines, Colorado, was not just a piece of real estate. It was my sanctuary. I had bought it with the blood, sweat, and tears of 8 long years of saving every single penny I earned from these brutal offshore deployments. I purchased it outright so I would have a quiet place to breathe when I finally returned to land. But 2 years ago, my mother, Helen, began complaining incessantly about her severe joint pain and how the damp city air was ruining her health. Like a dutiful daughter, I handed them the keys. I let them move into my dream home rent-free, while I relegated myself to a cramped, depressing apartment near the transit hub just to make my commute to the helipad easier. I did it out of love. They used it to fund my younger sister. Chloe was the family parasite, wrapped in designer clothes and an obsession with fake internet glamour. While I was thousands of miles offshore wrestling with hydraulic fluid and high-voltage cables, Chloe was busy playing the role of a wealthy socialite. She was always drowning in debt to maintain her flashy lifestyle. Every single crisis she created, whether it was maxing out 5 different credit cards or launching yet another fake startup company, was meticulously cleaned up by our parents. And their favorite method of cleaning up Chloe's messes was sacrificing my hard-earned stability. The initial shock radiating through my chest rapidly froze into a glacier of cold, calculated fury. My engineering mind instantly bypassed the emotional betrayal and locked onto the mechanical failure of their plan. I had never signed a power of attorney. I had never put their names on the deed. I had been isolated in the middle of the ocean for 21 days. Legally, it was entirely impossible for them to sell a house solely in my name without my physical presence or a notarized signature. They had not just sold my house. They had committed severe real estate fraud. I did not call my father back. I did not scream into the receiver or demand answers, because demanding answers from a thief only gives them the opportunity to lie. Instead, I opened my banking application. With a few swift taps, I permanently locked and canceled every single supplementary credit card I had ever issued to my parents for their living expenses. Then, I opened a secure, encrypted folder on my terminal and began pulling every digital record, every property tax receipt, and every bank statement tied to Silver Pines. They thought distance made me powerless. They thought my usual silent compliance was a sign of weakness. But out here in the dark, under thousands of pounds of atmospheric pressure, you learn how to survive by being colder and harder than your environment. The trap had been sprung, but Arthur and Helen had no idea that they were the ones standing inside it. 4 hours ticked by in the suffocating hum of the control center. My shift had ended, but adrenaline kept my heart hammering against my ribs. Suddenly, the secure satellite console on my desk flashed red. It was an encrypted incoming channel from the mainland, a line usually reserved for corporate emergencies or Coast Guard alerts. I picked up the heavy receiver. "Isabel Soto?" a deep, sharply professional voice asked over the static hiss of the satellite link. "Speaking," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly level. "Ms. Soto, my name is Marcus Vance. I am the managing partner at Vance & Associates, representing the buyer in the ongoing acquisition of your property in Silver Pines. I apologize for reaching out via a restricted offshore frequency, but your broker assured us you were unreachable, and we hit a snag that required immediate clarification before the final escrow release." A buyer, an escrow release. The gears in my head spun at lightning speed, but I revealed nothing. "Go on, Mr. Vance." "My client is an infrastructure developer from Silicon Valley," Marcus continued, his words clipped and precise. "He is meticulous. While reviewing the final transfer documents executed yesterday, his accountant noticed a discrepancy. The state energy engineer tax concession identifier attached to your name does not match the newly formed limited liability company that is listed as the recipient of the sale funds. We assumed this was a simple clerical error by your brokerage, perhaps a mismatched alphanumeric entry, but since the funds are substantial, my firm's protocol dictates direct verbal confirmation." He was expecting me to sigh, apologize for a minor administrative mix-up, and give him the correct tax identification string. He was expecting the boring, mundane bureaucracy of a standard real estate transaction. Instead, I gripped the receiver so tightly my knuckles turned white. I stared out the reinforced glass window into the pitch-black ocean. "Mr. Vance?" I said, my voice as cold as the water outside. "I'm going to stop you right there. I have been stationed on a deep-sea research rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico for the past 3 weeks. Our communications array was completely down until this morning. I have not spoken to any broker. I have not formed a limited liability company. And most importantly, I have never sold my house to anyone." Dead silence hung on the line. The satellite static crackled. For a long moment, the sharp, confident lawyer on the other end was entirely speechless. "Ms. Soto," Marcus finally responded, the professional polish dropping to reveal genuine alarm. "That is a very serious claim. I am looking at a finalized, digitally encrypted smart contract right now. It bears your secure electronic signature, stamped by a certified digital notary just 48 hours ago." "A signature can be hacked or forged," I countered instantly, my mind racing through the cybersecurity protocols I dealt with daily. "Yes, but this was a Tier 3 security clearance transaction," Marcus pressed, his voice tightening. "Because you were supposedly remote, the brokerage required biometric verification. Ms. Soto, I have an audio file in my possession. It is a recording of a phone call where a woman, identifying herself as you, provides personal security answers and explicitly authorizes the transfer of the deed to the new corporate entity. I heard the audio myself. The broker verified it against your previous voicemails. The air in the control room seemed to vanish, my lungs locked. An audio recording? A live phone call? How could they possibly fake my actual voice in a live, interactive conversation with a broker? And then, the horrifying truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. My father. Arthur was not just a lazy retiree living off my dime. Decades ago, before his ambition dried up entirely, he had been a senior audio technician for a major broadcasting network. He spent his entire career manipulating soundboards, splicing tape, and mastering vocal frequencies. In the past 2 years, artificial intelligence deepfake technology had become incredibly accessible. All someone needed was a few hours of high-quality audio to train a voice cloning model. I had a YouTube channel with over 50 hours of archived video logs detailing my underwater expeditions. I had spoken at length, in high-definition audio, answering technical questions, laughing, and conversing. He did not just forge a document. My own father had meticulously scraped my digital footprint, fed my voice into a neural network, and puppeteered a digital ghost of his own daughter to authorize the theft of my home. The sheer calculation of it was breathtaking. It was not a desperate, spur-of-the-moment mistake. It was a highly orchestrated cybercrime, premeditated and executed with ruthless precision by the man who raised me. "Mr. Vance?" I finally said, the terrifying pieces snapping perfectly into place. "The voice on that recording is not mine. It is an artificial intelligence-generated clone, synthesized from my public video logs. My family is attempting to steal my property. If you release those funds, your client will be an unwitting accessory to a massive federal wire fraud." I could hear Marcus take a sharp, steadying breath. The legal thriller had just broken wide open, and in the darkness of the ocean, I had finally found my weapon. "Mr. Vance, we need to completely freeze this transaction without alerting my family," I told the lawyer, my voice echoing slightly in the steel confines of the control room. "If they realize the buyer is onto their scheme, they will destroy the digital trail and find another victim. I need time to gather concrete proof." Marcus did not hesitate for a single second. The professional indignation in his voice was clear. "I agree entirely, Ms. Soto. My firm does not tolerate being utilized as an instrument for federal crimes. I will place a hard hold on the escrow release immediately. I will contact the title company and tell them my client has discovered a sudden, severe legal discrepancy regarding the historical property lines from an old 19th century land survey. Bureaucracy is exceptionally slow. That fabricated excuse will keep the money firmly locked in the trust account for at least 14 days, which gives you the window you need." We ended the call, and a chilling silence returned to the rig. I did not go back to my quarters to rest. Instead, I pivoted my chair toward the secondary diagnostic terminal, a machine boasting enough processing power to map the ocean floor in real time. It was more than capable of executing a little digital forensics. I was about to strip away the pristine, innocent masks my family wore and expose the rotting desperation underneath. My mother, Helen, had always been completely technologically illiterate. 5 years ago, I gave her my old tablet so we could video chat. What she did not realize, and what I had frankly forgotten until this exact moment, was that I never fully unlinked my administrative recovery email from her primary cloud account. She possessed terrible digital hygiene, using the same simple password for everything she owned. With a few keystrokes, I initiated a password reset protocol. The two-factor authentication prompt appeared on the screen, attempting to send a code to her mobile device. However, because the original recovery framework was still tethered to my secure engineering server, I easily bypassed the mobile prompt and rerouted the authorization token directly to my own encrypted inbox. Within 3 minutes, I had full, unfettered access to their entire synchronized digital life. I began sifting through gigabytes of shared photo albums, synced notes, and archived emails. I was looking for the motive. Why would they take such a massive, catastrophic risk to steal my house now? The answer lay buried in a folder named Lux Horizon, belonging to my sister. Chloe had always portrayed herself as a wildly successful entrepreneur on social media. According to the documents I was now downloading, Lux Horizon was supposedly a premier, ultra-luxury event planning agency. But as I parsed through the frantic, heavily redacted spreadsheets and a barrage of increasingly hostile emails from furious clients, the ugly truth laid itself bare. There was no business. It was a textbook Ponzi scheme. Chloe had been taking massive deposits, sometimes up to $50,000 per client, promising to secure exclusive venues and celebrity entertainers for high-profile weddings and corporate galas. But she never booked a single venue. She used the deposits from new clients to issue partial refunds to older, angry clients who threatened to sue, while siphoning off the massive difference to fund her own lavish lifestyle. The cloud storage was littered with digital receipts for first-class flights to Dubai, custom designer handbags, and expensive cosmetic procedures. She had burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars of other people's money, and the music had finally stopped. I found a PDF scan of a formal legal demand letter sent by a prominent entertainment attorney representing 3 of her wealthy victims. The letter was explicit. If Chloe did not return a total of $350,000 within 10 business days, they were going to bypass civil court entirely and hand their compiled evidence straight to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They were officially preparing to press federal charges for interstate wire fraud. Following the timestamp of that demand letter, I found a frantic chain of text messages between Chloe and our parents. Chloe had written, "They are going to lock me up. I am going to federal prison. Mom, you have to fix this." My mother's reply was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. She wrote, "Do not panic. Sweetie, your father and I are handling it. Isabella's property has enough equity to cover all of this. She owes us for raising her anyway. We will get the money." They had weighed the options. They chose to commit felony identity theft against their oldest daughter rather than let their youngest daughter face the consequences of her own criminal actions. But a glaring question remained. How did my father, a retired audio technician, successfully navigate the stringent biometric verification process required for a remote real estate closing? Deepfake audio could fool a broker on a standard phone call, but digital notaries required live visual identification. I dug into the digital signature logs attached to the fraudulent deed of sale that Marcus had forwarded to my secure server. I scanned the metadata looking for the notary identification number, when the name of the certifying agent finally popped up on the screen. A dark, humorless laugh escaped my throat. Gavin Pierce. Gavin was a sleazy, unlicensed commercial real estate fixer who also happened to be Chloe's toxic ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago. I found a string of encrypted messages proving that Gavin had acted as the inside man. For a 20% cut of the sale, Gavin used his proprietary broker portal access to deliberately flag the live video verification system as temporarily malfunctioning. Citing a fake technical glitch, he manually pushed my father's pre-recorded deepfake audio files through the security gateway, officially certifying the forged signature as legitimate. They had built a house of cards on a foundation of digital lies. I leaned back in my chair, watching the cursor blink rhythmically on the screen. I now possessed the exact IP addresses, the unedited text messages, the fraudulent audio files, and the demand letters. I had the entire conspiracy perfectly documented and safely stored on a server anchored thousands of feet underwater, far beyond their reach. The investigation was complete. It was time to start digging their graves. While Marcus stalled the escrow account on the mainland, I remained trapped in my steel cage suspended above the ocean floor, watching my family celebrate their successful heist in real time. My mother's synchronized cloud account gave me a front-row seat to their sickening victory lap. I opened Chloe's public social media feed. Right at the top, freshly uploaded, was a high-resolution photograph of my father, my mother, and Chloe standing on the wooden porch of my beautiful cabin in Silver Pines. They were locked in a dramatic, tearful embrace. Chloe had perfectly styled her hair to look effortlessly messy, wiping away a solitary, manufactured tear for the camera. The caption beneath the photo made my stomach violently churn. It read, "Family is our greatest strength. Sometimes, the people who love you most have to make sacrifices so you can soar." Thank you to my amazing big sister for voluntarily stepping back and giving up her home to lift up my dreams. A new chapter begins today. Below the post, dozens of her fake business associates and naive followers were leaving comments praising her resilience and my supposed generosity. She was framing the theft of my life savings as a beautiful act of sisterly charity. It was a masterclass in narcissistic delusion. She was using the home she stole from me to farm sympathy and internet validation. Meanwhile, my private inbox was a completely different story. The notifications from my parents were relentless, shifting rapidly from cold dismissal to aggressive moral manipulation. My mother sent a long, rambling message that reeked of entitlement. "Isabel, you need to be reasonable," she wrote. "You can buy a house at any time with that massive engineering salary of yours. But your sister is facing total ruin. Her honor and her future can only be saved this one single time. Do not be selfish. We are family. You have to protect your own flesh and blood." My father followed up with a sharper, more threatening tone. "The paperwork is finalized. Isabel, do not try to sabotage this. We did what we had to do to protect this family. Accept it." Selfish. That was the word they chose to describe the woman whose bank account they had just drained to keep their favorite child out of federal prison. I sat in the dim light of the control room, reading the messages over and over. A younger, weaker version of me would have fired back a furious paragraph, threatening lawsuits and screaming about justice. But out here in the abyss, you learn that thrashing around only alerts the predators. If you want to survive, you play dead. I crafted my reply with the cold precision of a surgeon. I needed them to believe they had completely broken my spirit. I needed them arrogant, comfortable, and totally off their guard. "I cannot fight you anymore," I typed, making sure the tone sounded utterly defeated. "I will let the sale proceed, and I will let it go, but I refuse to live with this hanging over my head. I want a formal, legally binding non-dispute agreement. I want it clearly stated in writing that after this money is transferred, you will never ask me for another dime, and I am officially cutting all ties with this family. If you want my silence, we sign it in person at the buyer's law firm on the day the escrow closes." The response was almost instantaneous. The relief radiating through the screen was palpable. They eagerly agreed. They truly believed they had successfully bullied their doormat of a daughter into total submission. We set the meeting for the upcoming Friday at the high-rise office of Marcus Vance in downtown Denver. With the bait swallowed whole, I moved to the final phase. I immediately submitted an emergency family crisis leave request to my rig supervisor. Given my flawless record, it was approved within the hour. By dawn, I was strapped into a transport helicopter, the deafening roar of the rotors vibrating through my chest as we sped away from the isolated rig and toward the sprawling mainland. When I landed, I did not go back to my cramped apartment. I went straight to a secure conference room where Marcus Vance was waiting for me, over cheap coffee and a mountain of printed digital evidence. We spent the next 48 hours laying down the wires for a devastating trap. Marcus and I were preparing a massive surprise, and it had absolutely nothing to do with resolving a simple real estate dispute. We were going to give my family exactly the audience they deserved. Friday morning arrived with the sharp, sterile chill of downtown Denver. The conference room at Vance & Associates was a modern fortress of floor-to-ceiling glass, polished mahogany, and immaculate leather chairs. I sat rigidly at the far end of the massive table, my posture straight, my expression an absolute void. Marcus Vance stood quietly near the expansive windows, his tailored suit cutting a sharp silhouette against the city skyline. We did not speak. We just waited for the rats to enter the maze. Exactly 10 minutes past the hour, the heavy glass doors swung open. My family walked in, moving with the exaggerated confidence of people who believed they had just successfully executed the perfect heist. Chloe led the pack, her designer heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. She was draped in a tailored cashmere coat that likely cost more than my first vehicle, swinging a luxury handbag with a prominent logo. She looked radiant, practically vibrating with the relief of a criminal who thought she had just bought her way out of federal prison. My mother, Helen, followed closely behind, wearing a sympathetic, condescending smile that made my skin crawl. Then came my father, Arthur, projecting the manufactured authority of a patriarch. Trailing behind them was Gavin Pierce, the crooked broker, clutching a sleek leather briefcase and looking entirely too pleased with himself. They took their seats opposite me, spreading out their expensive belongings on the polished wood. Nobody asked how my flight was. Nobody asked about my 3 weeks in the dark abyss of the ocean. Arthur did not even offer a greeting. He simply unbuttoned his suit jacket, reached into his breast pocket, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the smooth expanse of the mahogany table until it rested directly in front of my folded hands. "Let us make this quick and painless," Arthur said, his voice dripping with tired authority. "This is the non-dispute agreement you requested. We have even gone a step further to be generous. Once the escrow funds clear this afternoon, we have authorized a wire transfer of $10,000 to your personal checking account to help you secure a new apartment. Sign the paper. Isabel, sign it and be proud you did a good thing for the bloodline. You saved your sister. $10,000. They were offering me a $10,000 tip for stealing a home I had spent 8 years of grueling, bone-crushing labor to build. Chloe leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, her eyes wide with fake sincerity. "We really appreciate you being so understanding about this. Family has to stick together, right?" I looked down at the paper. I did not reach for the expensive pen Arthur had placed beside it. I let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating, until the smug smiles on their faces began to falter, replaced by a creeping, unspoken anxiety. "I am not signing anything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it echoed like a gunshot in the pristine room. Arthur slammed his hand on the table, his face instantly flushing with anger. "We had a deal. You gave us your word that you would not make this ugly." "I am not making it ugly," I replied, standing up slowly. "I am just making it accurate." I did not look at him. Instead, I picked up a small black remote resting near my elbow and pressed a single button. The motorized blinds covering the glass walls instantly hummed to life, sliding shut and plunging the room into shadows. A high-definition projector descended from the ceiling, casting a stark, blindingly bright screen against the far wall. "Let us review the authorization call," I announced, tapping a key on my laptop. The room filled with the crisp, amplified audio of the phone call Marcus had received from the brokerage. It was my voice, or rather, it was a terrifyingly perfect digital reconstruction of my voice, confidently providing my social security number, answering security questions, and authorizing the irrevocable transfer of my property deed to a new limited liability company. Gavin smirked, leaning back in his chair. "That is a legally binding verbal authorization, verified by a certified broker. You are just proving our case for us, sweetheart." "Am I asked, locking eyes with my father. I hit another key. The screen flickered, and a video filled the wall. It was a New Year holiday greeting I had recorded for the family 3 years ago from the deck of a research vessel. "Happy New Year to everyone back home." The digital version of me on the screen said brightly, "I am authorizing the transfer of all my love to you guys. The weather out here is deep and dark, but the company is great." I paused the video. I brought up a complex audio waveform analysis program right beside the video player, overlaying the frequency of the fraudulent phone call with the frequency of the holiday video. "You always were a brilliant audio technician, Dad," I said, my voice dripping with absolute venom. "But you were rushing. You used a cheap, open-source artificial intelligence software to clone my vocal cords. If you look at the waveform analysis right here on the screen, you can see the exact micro-stutters where the software spliced the word authorizing and the word transfer directly from my holiday video to construct your fake legal consent. The baseline room tone in the background of the phone call even matches the ambient engine hum of my old research vessel from 3 years ago." Arthur's arrogant posture collapsed. The color drained from his face so fast he looked practically translucent. He stared at the waveforms on the screen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as his entire premeditated cybercrime was laid bare under the harsh fluorescent glare of the projector. Gavin shot up from his chair scraping violently against the floor. Panic was beginning to crack his sleazy facade. "This is a bluff. It does not matter what audio you play in this room. The electronic contract was signed with a highly encrypted, biometric digital signature. That smart contract is irreversibly locked into the system. The law unequivocally protects the buyer in this scenario. You cannot undo a Tier 3 security clearance signature just because you have some fancy graphs." Marcus Vance finally stepped away from the window. He did not yell. He did not argue. He simply let out a low, chilling smirk that instantly froze the remaining oxygen in the room. Marcus walked to the center of the table and casually tossed a thick, heavy stack of printed network security logs right in front of Gavin and Chloe. "That is a certified Internet Protocol forensic report," Marcus stated, his baritone voice cutting through the panic with surgical precision. "It proves, beyond a shadow of a legal doubt, that the digital transfer document was generated, accessed, and signed from a localized wireless network registered to a residential address, specifically, your luxury apartment." Chloe gasped, shrinking back into her expensive coat as if the papers were on fire. Marcus turned toward Gavin, his eyes narrowing into deadly slits. "Furthermore, Mr. Pierce, you manually bypassed the visual biometric verification, claiming a server error, and pushed a standard mobile one-time password text message to verify the electronic signature. You stamped it as legally binding at exactly 2:14 in the afternoon on a Tuesday." I leaned across the table, planting my hands firmly on the mahogany, closing the distance between myself and my hyperventilating parents. "Do you know where I was at 2:14 on that Tuesday?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. "I was inside a pressurized titanium submersible, performing maintenance on a thermal vent exactly 3,000 meters below sea level. There are no cell phone towers at the bottom of the ocean. It is physically, scientifically, and technologically impossible for my mobile device to receive a one-time password text message at that depth." The silence that followed was absolute. The trap had violently snapped shut, its steel teeth sinking deep into their bones, and they finally realized they were going to bleed. Chloe sprang up so violently that her heavy chair tipped backward and crashed onto the polished hardwood floor. She knocked her designer bag off the table, spilling expensive makeup and maxed-out credit cards everywhere. "I was just borrowing it," she shrieked, the polished, confident influencer mask completely dissolving into the face of a terrified, cornered child. "I needed the capital to secure the international venue. Once the gala was finished, I was going to pay you back with interest. I was going to buy you a bigger, better mansion in the mountains. You are ruining my entire life, my entire business, over a temporary loan. You are so selfish, Isabel." Marcus laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound that echoed sharply off the glass walls. "A temporary loan? That is a very creative way to describe a textbook Ponzi scheme." Chloe froze, her mouth hanging open. Marcus calmly buttoned his tailored suit jacket and stepped closer to the table, looking down at her with absolute professional disgust. "You see, Chloe, I do not represent a Silicon Valley infrastructure developer. That was a necessary legal fiction I invented to keep the stolen funds frozen securely in our trust account. My firm actually represents a prominent entertainment attorney and the 3 very angry, very wealthy event clients you defrauded out of $350,000. When Gavin tried to push this fraudulent sale through, our financial investigators immediately flagged the transaction as an active attempt to launder stolen assets. Before anyone in my family could process the sheer magnitude of that revelation, the heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open once again. It was not a paralegal bringing more coffee. 2 large men and 1 woman, dressed in stark dark windbreakers with the words Federal Bureau of Investigation printed in bold yellow letters across the back, walked purposefully into the room. The lead agent did not waste a single breath on pleasantries or introductions. He looked directly at my sister and the sleazy broker. "Chloe Soto and Gavin Pierce, You are both under arrest for conspiracy to commit interstate wire fraud and felony financial fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The harsh metallic sound of handcuffs clicking tightly around Chloe's wrists echoed sharply in the silent room. She sobbed violently, her knees buckling beneath her, but the federal agents held her up effortlessly. Gavin did not say a word. He just stared blankly at the floor, his arrogant confidence completely destroyed. My mother let out a guttural, agonizing wail. She scrambled clumsily out of her leather chair and threw herself directly at my feet, her hands desperately grasping at the fabric of my jeans. "Isabel, please!" Helen cried, her face stained with dark streaks of ruined mascara. "Please tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave us permission to sign the papers. If you press charges for the fake audio signature, they are going to arrest your father and me as accomplices. You cannot send your own parents to federal prison. Have some mercy on us." Arthur stood paralyzed beside the controlling patriarch completely shattered. Tears were welling in his wide, terrified eyes, but he was too stunned to even speak. I looked down at the woman who had birthed me, the woman who had happily plotted to steal my only sanctuary just to save her favorite, criminal child. I searched my heart for a shred of pity, but I found absolutely nothing. There was no sorrow, no regret, just the cold, crushing pressure of the deep sea that had become my armor. I stood up slowly and forcefully brushed my mother's trembling hands away from my legs. "My house, my decision," I said, my voice echoing with quiet, brutal finality. "The prison. You chose yourselves." I turned my back on them and walked straight out of the glass room. I did not look over my shoulder even a single time as their pathetic, desperate sobbing faded behind the heavy doors. 6 months later, the legal dust finally settled. Chloe was convicted and sentenced to serve 5 years in a federal penitentiary. The presiding judge showed zero leniency for her predatory financial schemes. My parents barely managed to avoid jail time by turning state's evidence against Gavin and cooperating with the authorities. But the immense legal fees and federal restitution fines completely bankrupted them. They were formally evicted from my property and forced to move into a tiny, run-down public housing unit on the gritty outskirts of the city, absolutely drowning in a sea of unpayable legal debt. As for me, I returned to Silver Pines on a crisp Tuesday afternoon. The mountain air was sharp, clean, and filled with the calming scent of pine needles. The very first thing I did was hire a professional locksmith to replace every single lock and deadbolt on the property. The second thing I did was grab several heavy-duty garbage bags. I walked through the rooms, aggressively throwing away all the cheap luxury items, empty designer perfume bottles, and tacky decorations they had left behind. I dragged the heavy bags down to the curb, effectively purging the final rotting remnants of their toxic existence from my sanctuary. When the house was finally clean and quiet, I stood directly in the center of the empty living room. The afternoon sun was streaming through the large windows, casting warm golden light across the hardwood floor. I closed my eyes and took a long, deep breath. There was no more family left to drag me down, but finally, after years of drowning in their demands, I had achieved a priceless, unbreakable peace that belonged entirely to me. Thank you so very much for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave your city or country in the comments below. As we mentioned earlier, if you found today's story captivating, please remember that YouTube has demonetized our channel, meaning we will unfortunately not be uploading any new videos here in the near future. We are officially moving our operations to Patreon, and we desperately need your help to keep bringing these narratives to life. By joining our Patreon family, you will gain access to our absolute best, longest, and most detailed exclusive true stories that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can scan the QR code right now on your screen, or use the Patreon link provided in the description or the pinned comment to support us. Thank you again, and stay safe out there.